what are we? Are we an art? Are we a sport? Are we a martial art or a philosophy or a lifestyle? And depending on the person, you're going to get different answers. And I don't think any of them are wrong, but unfortunately, it makes it very hard for us to like unify and like gain momentum in a certain direction.
Welcome to the Upside Strength Podcast, your number one resource for all things fitness and performance in Switzerland. Today, I'll be chatting with Ryan Ford, parkour athlete, coach, entrepreneur, and the author of Parkour Strength Training. Ryan, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So for people who don't know you, can you talk a little bit about yourself? Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so just I'll give you the real quick version. You can find all this stuff online as well, but
For sure.
yeah, I guess I'm mostly known for parkour and what I've done in the parkour world. When I started doing parkour about, I can't even keep track now, it's like 15 or 16 years, something like that.
Yeah.
When I started that in Colorado, I couldn't find anyone else who did parkour in Colorado. So I was mostly kind of on my own and self-taught at first, and then slowly more people joined up and we started classes. I believe it was one of the first formal parkour programs in the Western Hemisphere. That was back in 2006. We started teaching out of a bouldering gym here in Boulder, Colorado, which is where I'm based now. Mm-hmm. And over the years, we kind of grew that program. We opened our own space in 2009. And then we grew that Apex School of Movement into a few other locations. I also wrote a book called Parkour Strength Training, which I sort of saw this lack of attention to physical training in parkour. So 10 years ago, people in parkour were not very into weightlifting, or in some cases they weren't into physical training at all. So they were just going out to do parkour and they got hurt. And so I kind of saw this need to draw my experiences into parkour. And I came from a team sports background mostly. So I did soccer from age 3 to 13. And then I kind of transitioned over into track and field and American football as my main sport.
Yeah.
And then I switched over to parkour. So I'm jumping all over the place here, but yeah, I got into parkour in high school. And then that's when we eventually started teaching, opening my own gym, teaching my own programs, writing the book. And then a little more recently, we were starting to focus more of our attention into the online education world. So developing online courses and free content and blogs and all that kind of stuff. And with everything's changed now post-pandemic, or I guess we're still in the pandemic, but
right.
Everybody sees this new need to kind of expand and grow into the online world. And luckily we had already started to do that a few years back, but I think that's what I really enjoy the most actually is content creation. So I really like to research and read and write and do video and create this content. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now and what I hope to continue doing here.
Yeah, definitely want to go a little bit deeper into all the physical preparation around parkour with you today. Before that, can you talk about how you first found out about parkour when you were in high school, you mentioned?
Yeah, so I started parkour I was getting burnt out playing football, but actually there's like a world famous concert venue here locally that I lived really close to called Red Rocks Amphitheater.
Right.
It's this amazing amphitheater built into these massive sandstone monoliths. And there's like 100 like really big steps or rows of seating that go all the way up to the top. So yeah, I was going there when I played football and I was just running the steps and trying to get into shape, working on my cardio, getting back in shape from the off season.
Yeah.
And right around then is also when me and some buddies had the brilliant idea to learn how to do a wall flip. So running up the wall, back flip off. And that's when we, one day after school, decided to go to the library. Had a nice brick wall and some nice grass right underneath of it. And so we had no idea what we were doing. I don't think we had even found a tutorial at this point. I don't even know where the idea came from or who had even saw this or thought it was possible. But eventually my buddy who did ninjutsu steps up and he's like, I got this. So he takes 2 steps up the wall, falls down flat on his back, knocks the wind out of himself, is rolling around, gasping for air. And we're all like terrified to see this. But eventually he got up like 5-10 minutes later, thought about it and was like, I got this. I understand what I did wrong and I'm going to do it. And he nailed it. He actually stomped it with no experience, no spotter, no mats, no nothing. And after seeing that though, we didn't want to try that. So nobody else tried it that day. And that's when we ended up going online. And I think we came across a few of the really early websites that had this sort of stuff were like urbanfreeflow.com, trickstutorials.com. And so we got a little bit of basic knowledge from websites. And I was actually downloading parkour videos on my parents' dial-up modem. I'm still in high school. And this is actually, I think, right before YouTube or right around when YouTube started. So
Right.
you actually had to go to the website, and there was another French one called parkour.net, I think was one of the bigger ones at the time. And so I would download videos on the dial-up modem overnight, come back the next day because it took forever, and I would watch it. And then I'd be at Red Rocks Amphitheater running the steps. And that's when I was kind of like looking around like, okay, I should try, or I wonder if I can jump from there to there or like climb up that thing. And yeah, I was kind of drifting away from football, and parkour came in at the perfect time. And I made the switch from there.
Without making it too heavy a question for you, but what is parkour for you? Or what was it when you started, and what does it mean to you now?
Yeah, that's a tough one because parkour has this ongoing identity crisis where it's so open-ended, and you ask this question to 20 different parkour people and they're going to give you 20 different answers.
Yeah.
I think everybody does it for slightly different reasons. And although the movement that they are doing may look similar to each other, the intention is often very different behind why are they moving like that. So yeah, that's a really tough one. I guess in general, parkour is essentially a training methodology where we're training our body and mind to overcome obstacles. And so there is a huge physical component. And for some people, it looks or is a sport. So Valentin, and he's really into the speed parkour aspect, which at this point I would say is 100% a sport. It's like, can you get from A to B as fast as possible? And the stopwatch is your official judge, and it's not debatable. And I actually really like that aspect of the objectivity or the measurable aspect of, okay, if we're going to train for speed and we use this technique and then we compare it to this technique and this one was 0.2 seconds slower, well, we're going to go with that one. So I really enjoy that aspect. And for me, I am more attracted to the practicality or the useful kind of mentality of parkour. So if there were a burning building and I had to get out of it, or I had to climb up and go save somebody, could I do that? Or could I just, for fun or sport, get from A to B as fast as I can and maybe set my benchmark time is 20 seconds on this one course here in Boulder. And then I keep training and I keep running it, and maybe I get it down to 19 seconds and then 18 seconds. And I'm just getting better and better. And the stopwatch is essentially my judge, or that's how I get the feedback and how I keep improving. So there's the speed parkour element, which is very related to parkour's roots in kind of like practicality or the utilitarian or usefulness aspect. One of the mantras or mottos of parkour that goes way back into the natural method is be strong to be useful. And so yeah, there's that element. But also on the other hand, and this is what I'm talking about, the identity crisis with parkour, you've got other people who just do it for the social aspect or because it's fun and they're like a little kid and they like to, run and jump and climb and not even think about it. Maybe they don't have this extremely organized or serious training regimen. They just like to go out and, have fun. It's like tapping into the childhood mindset. Other people, they're maybe into like the aesthetic or the creativity or the difficulty aspects. So they might be looking at the same course that I'm running for time, and maybe they want to throw a few flips into it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not really what I'm into anymore. I used to do more flips, but not too much recently. But that's a lot of people in parkour do that too. So they'll take elements from this practicality sort of style or the aesthetic or creativity style and mix it together. And most people in parkour also dabble in tricking or breakdancing, martial arts, climbing, gymnastics, track and field, weightlifting. I see parkour as very multidisciplinary, and that's one reason I really like it, because in my opinion, it never gets boring because you always have some other little area or niche to expand into. So you could spend the next year just focusing on like the climbing aspects of parkour. So a climb up, like hanging on a wall and doing a muscle up to get up and over. or some people call this buildering. So applying the idea of rock climbing or bouldering, but to the urban environment, which you could call buildering. So you could spend a year or two or years just in that little niche. And then once you get bored of it, maybe you're into like weightlifting and plyometrics and you want to see how far you can push your jump or your strides. So I really see my journey in parkour as like all these different phases of really like diving deep into one area and just getting as good as I can there and getting as much understanding as I can there. And then maybe expanding or switching it up and going into acro. Like for 1 month, way back in the day, I did twisting acrobatics every single day for a month because I was just terrible at twisting and I get completely lost when I do like a backflip with a full twist, back pull. So I was terrible at that, and I just dedicated a whole month to doing it every single day and making a video, and I made a lot of progress. I got my back full on the trampoline, and so there's just so many ways you can take parkour, whether you have that mentality of aesthetics, creativity, practicality, speed, and then of course, like over half of the world's population nowadays lives in an urban setting. So I think that this is a really important thing for us to get out and experience our city, you know, when it may seem so unwelcoming or harsh, or I don't know what exactly I'm getting at here, but I feel like a lot of people are not in touch with the outdoors. And unfortunately in cities, we don't have, you know, your natural wilderness, but we do have little pockets. And I think people need to go out and explore. I think that's a huge part of parkour as well, is just go explore your own capabilities, but go explore your environment. And a lot of people think that city is like, oh, don't go out there, like you're going to get hurt, it's concrete, it's metal, or there's, you know, people who are going to try to like mug you and take your money. Or I think parkour is actually very empowering. It gets you comfortable even in the grungiest like urban settings. I actually like to travel and just go find some back alleys in some foreign city, and I think it's cool. It's kind of scary, but it's also a little bit exciting. And so I guess that to sum up everything I just said right there, parkour can be anything and everything, and that's both a bug and a feature. It's good and bad. It allows for a lot of really interesting innovation, but it's challenging for us to, as a culture or a sport or a whatever you want to call it, it's sometimes challenging for us to be like, okay, what are we? Like, where are we going? Where do we want this to go? What are we doing?
Your perspective is really interesting to me in the sense that, like you said, people go, you know, outdoors and they want to go to the mountains and they want to go for a hike, but we don't think about doing that in our cities. You know, you go out in the city,
Right.
you go out to have a drink, you go out to have something to eat, you go to some, you know, building, but we don't use the urban environment, like you said, to actually move around like we totally do in nature, quote unquote, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, so this past summer, and I guess most of this year, because of the pandemic, is everything's just been a little bit weird and different. But at least from, I guess, March through July or August, at least around here in Boulder, Colorado, everything in the city was kind of abandoned. Like people weren't going out. People are afraid to go out, and I kept going out, and we would go to, you know, the campus or these parking garages, or, you know, training on anywhere around the city. And it was really interesting because we'd see so few humans, but you'd start to see the wildlife coming out. So we see raccoons and squirrels and crows and hawks. And when you're up high on some of these parking garages or buildings, so yesterday we were up in a parking garage, and we're standing like at this wall, and we're looking kind of down and out at the mountains and the sunset, and this big red-tailed hawk just floats by, actually below us. Like we're above the red-tailed hawk, soaring above the city. And I think these are just little like magical moments of the city that most people are completely unaware of. They don't even realize that there's wildlife in the city, because they're not out there and they're not exploring the parks and they're not seeing it.
Yeah, and like you said, maybe when human life gets a little quieter, then nature kind of creeps back in pretty quickly, and we realize that, you know, we have all these, I guess, urban environments that are kind of established as we think of them, but it wouldn't take very long for quote unquote nature to take it back over if it really wanted to, right?
Yeah, actually, on that note, I've been really into climbing. Well, climbing is one of my favorite things actually for the past 10 years. So I do parkour and I do bouldering. Not too much with ropes or equipment, just because I'm a very like minimalist person, and I like the in parkour and bouldering. I like the idea of you can just walk out your door and go do it. You don't need anything.
Mhm.
So we've been climbing a lot lately, and one thing I've noticed in the summertime, at least, is that when you're climbing up these certain areas, like we climb up into door frames and then up onto various features of the wall or the building, and you find like wasp nests, like right where you want to put your, like that last hold at the top. There's
Yeah.
like a little wasp nest. Maybe it's abandoned, maybe it's not. Or there's like a bird's nest that's actually, we found like little baby birds in it sometimes. And yeah, it's cool what you find when you get out there and explore and do parkour.
You mentioned the multifaceted aspect of parkour as a discipline. What have been your main strength and conditioning influences as you've come up, as a coach in parkour, trying to bring that physical training aspect to the discipline and to the sport?
Yeah, do you mean like coaches or systems, or do you mean like
All
styles of
all of
training?
the above.
Okay. Yeah, it's a pretty long list at this point. Like I said, I've kind of, it's almost like every year or two I expand into some other area. So I consider it, it's a constant journey of learning. And once you think you know everything, you realize you know nothing. And so you just keep plugging away and you keep trying to fill in the gaps where you don't understand something, or maybe where you're not familiar with it. So I guess if I were to kind of think about my journey through that, it started, of course, with soccer when I was 3 years old, and just, the team sports, learning how to hit a ball, play baseball, tennis, basketball. Like I did all these things, at least to some extent, although soccer was my main thing for 10 years. When I got to be into high school, that's when I switched over to American football, track and field, and weightlifting.
Mhm.
So I decided I was burnt out on soccer and I wanted to play football. But I was the scrawniest, like weakest little kid on the level three, the freshman, the youngest team at my school. So I realized I had to do something about that. And well, my dad maybe realized it first, but my dad got me one session with a personal trainer, and he also bought me um, I think it was just one of those racks that could be used as a bench press or a squat rack.
Okay.
So I would be in my basement late at night, all by myself, just like pumping iron, trying to get bigger, trying to get stronger, so that I could actually, play in the football games and not be a bench warmer. Because I think I was seriously like 110 pounds, so like 50 kilos or something, as a high schooler trying to get into American football, where you just like smash into each other. So
Yeah.
after I'd say maybe a year or two of weightlifting, and I was not enlightened at all at this point. I was just like, okay, I need to do bench press and back squat and deadlift, and actually power clean. Power clean was on there because my football team had these boards up in the weight room of, once you reach like a certain milestone of like, can you lift X amount of pounds over your body weight, you get your name up on here. And
Right.
the hardest level, there was like 2 people in the entire school that could get there. So after a couple of years, I got to the second level of everything, which was, I don't know why, I'm just like motivated by numbers and objectivity. And I could get that immediate feedback, like, oh, I can lift this much this week and I'm going to just keep doing it. And then next week, oh, I can do like a little bit more. Nice. I'm going to keep doing that. So yeah, that's when I got really into lifting and learned a lot through that. In football, I also started to get introduced to a lot of, and also track and field, I was getting introduced to plyometrics and like speed training, agility training. And then getting burnt out on football and then transitioning into parkour. That's when I think I started really opening my eyes to the body weight training world.
Mm-hmm.
So getting more into like looking at the gymnastic stuff created by like Christopher Summer or Ido Portal or Stephen Lowe, or all these big names and books, and there's like anything I could get my hands on. Also, as the internet grew and got bigger, you could become your own self-learner and, teach yourself anything as long as you know where to look. So yeah, I was getting really into like the bodyweight training stuff, and then spent a lot of time there, at least a few years, I'd say. Not that I didn't lift anymore, but I definitely took a step back from lifting, and I actually realized that I could do like weighted chin-ups or weighted dips or just train muscle ups and do rings, and actually go back and test my bench press after not doing it for years, and it was actually bigger than ever. So I was like, okay, so I'm not only maintaining what I could do in lifting despite not lifting, but I'm also getting stronger at all these other things. So it's like gains in this one area, but also some free gains in this other area. And yeah, so really delving into the body weight stuff, and I had the lifting background, and then you kind of put those two together, and then you get into the plyometrics. I think, around 2012 or through 2015 or so, that's when I got really obsessed with power training. So I was really diving into like plyometrics, depth jumps, bounding, and all this kind of stuff, so that in parkour, obviously, if you can jump farther, a lot of things that you could not do are now unlocked. So power is I do see parkour, at least the way that most people train it nowadays, it is a strength or power-based sport, because even at a beginner level, if you can't pull yourself up and over a wall, if you can't, push your body weight to pop up onto a rail or over a rail or do a backflip, like these are all things that take some baseline power and strength. So I really kind of got into the power. And then also a huge area that I forgot to mention that I really wish I would have understood or got into much earlier is mobility. So I have extremely tight ankles that, in my opinion, have been the major contributor to getting right ankle surgery and a left knee surgery. I had runner's knee in my left knee from overuse, and I had anterior ankle impingement syndrome, also known as footballer's ankle, in my right ankle. So I think these things were kind of the injuries were related to my really tight ankles and my lack of mobility in general. However, I did not even realize that I had tight ankles until I was in my 20s, and had somebody just, kind of explain this to me when I was 16 years old, sat me down, been like, hey, look, you can't even like full squat like you should be able to. And it's because you're tight ankles and you need to do this and this and this. That actually probably could have saved me a lot of time and frustration and surgery and pain. And I could have, done parkour more and gotten better. And unfortunately, I'll never know what that full potential was, but at least I learned a lot. And now that forced me to really dive deep into mobility, which I guess is kind of connected to a lot of the gymnastics or body weight strength training stuff, especially what like Ido Portal and Christopher Summer are getting into. How do we get our overhead shoulder mobility back? How do we get that full squat better? How do we improve the ankle dorsiflexion? So what some like really key athletic qualities that will make your performance not only better, but more sustainable in the long run. So yeah, that was a huge other area, is the mobility. So yeah, at this point I guess I'm always kind of looking for the 80-20 rule as well. So like, how can I apply 80-20 rule to my training or other people's training? So what's the 20% of exercises or movements or whatever that I should be training or that my students should be training to get 80% of the gains? And then of course you've got this 80% more material to fill in the extra little 20% that is not covered there. But it's about being efficient with your training. A lot of people think they just need to do more and more and more and train harder, but actually like you can just train smarter and more intelligently. And yeah, so there's a big, long, rambling answer to your question.
No, I think it's a great answer, but like you said, there's so many facets to the discipline, and especially on the physical side, gymnastics, the sprinting, the plyometrics, the strength, the mobility. You have to pick and choose. You can't just do everything on all fronts all the time, because there's just not enough time in the day, right?
Yeah, definitely. And man, you can go so deep into like even power or speed or mobility. That is such a vast field with so many applications to different sports and different athletes and different ages and different ability levels. And yeah, it's just an ongoing battle to try to fill in all the gaps. But I do really enjoy the multidisciplinary outlook on parkour and other things related to it.
So let's actually pick up with mobility for parkour.
Sure.
What is the 20% for you that gives you the most bang for your buck that everybody should at least be cognizant of, if not applying in their training weekly?
Yeah. So I would say parkour, like most sports, well, maybe not most sports, but many sports, we'll say, are lower body dominant. Um, Anything that's going to involve your running and jumping and sprinting and cutting and dodging, and we're bipedal creatures. Our connection is through our feet to the ground, and if your feet or your ankles are messed up, you're screwed. So even especially in parkour, when you're doing these massive jumps and landing on a tiny little rail,
Mhm.
and you land a little bit short or you land a little bit off, like you better have some serious strength and mobility in your feet, your ankles. Specifically, ankle dorsiflexion is incredibly important, I think, in parkour and most sports in general.
Mhm.
And then that full squat mobility in general, which is connected to the ankles and the hip mobility. So, yeah, when I'm looking at an athlete or myself or somebody in parkour, as far as mobility, I guess the place I start is, let me see your full squat. And then if the full squat is a bit off, then I'm going to look at the ankles or the hips or try to find out
Mhm.
why can't they squat all the way down to, butt on their heels, flat footed, barefoot. And then bonus, if you can get the overhead posture as well. So a lot of people, they can squat down, feet flat on the ground, but they're really hunched over and they struggle to, get their chest up and get their arms up overhead. So really the complete snapshot, or not a complete, but a very quick and near complete snapshot of somebody's overall mobility level for parkour or sport in general is kind of given by just a quick overhead squat, like full range of motion overhead squat. And then that'll give you some leads, like, oh, the bar is dropping, so they lack the shoulder mobility, or oh, their heels can't stay on flat on the ground, so maybe they need more ankle dorsiflexion. And then we can do a test for that and find out. So yeah, I'd say for parkour or most sports in general, the full squat is going to be an amazing place to start and an amazing place to work on constantly. Like no matter
Mhm.
how good you are at your full squat, I think you can unlock some new gains just by developing that.
And then if you run into someone who has some limitations, whether it's in their ankles, their hips, their shoulders, what are some of the strategies or the methods that you've used with success over the years to try and
Mhm.
improve those different qualities?
Yeah, so that's a tough question. I think it depends a lot on the person.
Mm-hmm.
Part of why I think I have bad mobility is because for the longest time in my teens and my 20s, I just despised mobility training. It was just really boring to me and I didn't want to do it. It's kind of painful when you do it. Like when you work hard on your mobility, it's really hard work. It's not meant to be. Unfortunately, a lot of people approach their mobility training as like, oh, I'm just going to stand there and like touch my toes for like a minute or two. And they don't break a sweat. They're like checking their phone or talking to their friend. And they're not really pushing it to their end range, like hard, like you need to if you really want to make it worth your time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yeah, I didn't get that for a long time. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't have the mindset to want to push myself to develop my mobility.
Mm-hmm.
So I think recognizing that is one big thing. So another way that kind of shifted when I was able to like actually tackle my mobility a bit better is when I approached it a bit more like strength training. So
Mm-hmm.
rather than like hold this stretch for this long or whatever, it's like, no, we're going to do overhead squats for 30 reps at a slower paced tempo just to accumulate volume and reps and like constantly pushing to our end range and our ankles, our squat, our overhead shoulder mobility. And when I approached it a little bit more like that, like, do a couple sets of this with this many reps or, a few different things to work on my ankles. That's when I could at least be like, okay, I just got to like follow this plan and we can maybe measure it even, like maybe I'm using weight and over time I'm gradually using a little bit more weight. And then I can actually concretely, I don't know if that's a word,
That,
concretely
that works. That works.
see if I'm making progress or gains. So yeah, when I add that element of objectivity or like being able to measure it, that helps me a lot because I need that feedback to stay motivated. But also I've come across some other approaches that have really worked better for me. not better, but just different ways. And I think so when you're tackling this mobility issue, you're trying to get people to be less stiff. They might have that mindset where they can just go to yoga like every day and just, get more flexible. But I'm not really into that. So I had to approach it a little more like methodically, scientifically. Maybe you probably heard of like FRC. Dr. Spina has been very influential on my mobility training as well. And they approach it very scientifically. And I think that was kind of missing for me when I heard how they approached it. And when I did their seminar and learned about it, that was one big epiphany for me. But also there's some, I think, a little more like soft science approaches to developing mobility. And these are like lifestyle changes. So for example, I'm sitting on the floor right now. I do almost all of my work sitting on the floor on my laptop, and I'm constantly like moving around and adjusting, and I'm getting up and down off of the ground constantly all day. So just accumulating those reps of, it sounds silly, but just getting, down to the ground and up off the ground like many times a day can go a long way to developing your squat if you have a bad squat. So there's some people that talk about like lifestyle changes, like get rid of your furniture, work on the floor, eat on the floor. These are found in many cultures, like especially some of the Asian cultures. They eat, sitting down or in seiza or in a full squat with little tables or even on the floor. We've lost that in the USA, and I think probably Western Europe as well, to an extent at least. So yeah, these are little lifestyle changes that you can make. Also, so after I got my ankle surgery, I did not recover well from that. I had this big spot, like probably that big on the top of my foot that was discolored and had no feeling. And so there's some kind of nerve damage done in the surgery. And I don't think the surgery actually helped my mobility either.
Yeah.
So I had to come back from that. And actually, when I woke up from the surgery, the doctor said, yeah, so it was worse than we thought. And you have a dime-sized hole in the cartilage under your tibia now. And that's big enough where we highly recommend that you recover from this surgery and then go get another surgery called de novo procedure, which is going to put you out for a full year of zero impact. And here's my very crude understanding of how it works, is they take stem cells from fetuses or embryos or however that works.
Right.
And they take stem cells out of your own hip and they kind of mix it together and glue it onto the hole in your bone or cartilage. And then over a long time, it regrows and actually apparently has some pretty good success rates nowadays. However, who knows long term? It hasn't been around long enough to know how that holds up over time. So I opted out of that. I was like, no, I'm going to see if I can just come back from this. And it was pretty demotivating and frustrating that it actually maybe made me worse. And I had to deal with that for many months later. So working on my lack of mobility, and then on top of that, working on just getting back to where my lack of mobility used to be, and then finally being able to build back expand into greater range of motion. And a couple other methods. So sorry for the long-winded roundabout answer, but a couple other methods that I used because of these problems I was facing personally. I stopped riding my bike. I used to ride my bike all the time in college. But I stopped riding my bike around Boulder here. It's like a very small town that you can it's condensed. You can get around pretty quickly, even on foot or bike. So I stopped riding my bike and I just started walking everywhere. I live pretty close to the downtown area, and I would go to coffee shops and do my work and walk like at least a couple miles a day, just kind of bouncing around coffee shops or downtown, maybe stopping a train here and there, and just walking a lot. That accumulates those low intensity reps. And then intentional walking. So I started, when I'd be done for the day, I'd be walking home and maybe got like a half-mile walk ahead of me, and I intentionally would walk in very specific gaits or very specific ways to stretch the ankle or to hit the small intrinsic muscles in the foot. I'd often do this barefoot. I just carry my shoes or put them in my backpack. And the other kind of interesting thing, I haven't actually ever really talked about this publicly, so maybe it's a good time to strike up some conversation, see if there's anyone else out there who has done this experimentation and had good results like I have. I found that actually cannabis products have helped me embrace mobility training more than almost anything else. And I think my theory on that is when you use cannabis in the like a responsible way, of course, and it's legal here in Colorado, which is nice.
Right.
But I never used it until the past few years when it became legal and more convenient and accessible. And so experimenting with that, I think there's something about cannabis it brings you into yourself a little bit more. It puts you more into your body. I find that when I'm using it, I can feel injuries, I can feel pains, I can feel things in my body that I'm usually maybe not so aware of. And so when I do mobility training with cannabis, it actually allows me to like target a muscle. Like I can feel I can pinpoint where I'm trying to work on. And not only that, I'm actually like, it feels good. It's fun. It's like more interesting. And I actually enjoy it at that point. So yeah, there's a few different ways you can experiment with mobility training.
Yeah, I had a good friend of mine, Ricardo Rivera, he's a pharmacologist specialized in cannabis. He works in BC, and so we talked about that, and we talked about the relationship between cannabis and sports. Obviously, when it comes to the rules and regulation of competitions and how not to get into trouble on that front, but also what do most athletes use it for? They use it to relax, they use it to calm down after a long day of training. That there's a lot of uses like that are maybe not advertised to the grand public, but that like you've discovered that through your own practice, it seems like many other people have as well, and it seems to be something that helps many people, like you said, just kind of take it down a couple notches from our regular intense training and all we talked about strength training, talked about plyometrics. Those things are all very intense and require a lot of tension, and so when it comes down to kind of shutting those things off, cannabis definitely can be something that helps us, right?
Definitely. And yeah, when I kind of go about this in the right way, I could spend an hour or two just like slowly bouncing on my foot, just in different ways, like trying to stretch out that ankle and my right ankle, especially with all the scar tissue or the reconstruction inside of there. Sometimes I'll just be walking around. This is like everyday life when I'm not using cannabis, but this is kind of scary, but I can walk around and just take one step and it can be just a little bit off. And for some reason it is like crippling pain just for like a split second. And that's of course, tracing back to my injuries and my surgery. But yeah, when I'm completely sober, not using cannabis, it's like a little bit harder to tackle that because it is still painful sometimes.
Yeah.
But when I use cannabis, yeah, I found that I can maybe like work around those little tiny problem spots and just like, again, be more targeted and pinpoint my problems and actually accumulate the amount of time and intentional practice that you need to develop your mobility. Because unfortunately, mobility is one of those things, cardio you can build up in a matter of weeks, and strength and power you can build up over a matter of months. Mobility is probably, especially if you're an adult and you're really stiff, it's probably going to take you years to make significant progress on some of your mobility stuff. And people don't want to hear that. That sucks to think about if you're really struggling with. But the sooner you can accept that truth, the better, because it takes a lot of very dedicated, consistent effort as a tight adult who needs to work on that.
I'm interested in your perspective on that mobility versus stiffness kind of dichotomy in parkour, because you talked about plyometrics, and for those who know parkour, and even for those who have just watched a few videos, the amount of impact that you take, the rebounds that you have to do, all those things require a lot of stiffness in the body and in the lower leg and in the foot. So how do you balance out those two practices of trying to get yourself more mobile, but then also knowing that you also have to train essentially the complete opposite end of the spectrum so that you can perform in your sport?
Yeah, it's a good one. It unfortunately, in our world of training people, the correct answer is often just, it depends. Depends on the person, depends on their age, their ability level, their strength, their mobility. So I'm an extremely tight person. So I'm actually like kind of one end of the spectrum, which has been very enlightening, and it allows me to like relate to the people who struggle with this stuff because I've constantly struggled with it. And so in that sense, I would be a little less likely to understand the people on the opposite end of the spectrum. So the people who are hypermobile and who don't struggle with any of this, and what they actually struggle with is like what you're saying, like the stiffness or the hypermobile people. And I've worked with quite a few of them. They tend to be like very noodly or like kind of wobbly when they jump or land or sprint, and maybe they haven't, maybe they come from this background of like gymnastics or yoga or something that requires a lot of mobility. And so they've got that covered, but they're not super great at like running or jumping. And so they need to learn how to be much, tighter and stiffer in not only their lower body, but also their core. And I find deadlift can be really great for that. I'm just learning how to like really brace and stay stiff and not, lost my headphone. It teaches them just to be a lot stiffer and be able to translate that over to when they jump so that they don't like lose that tension and, collapse. And then we call it a force leak, where it's like you're leaking force, you're leaking power out of this unstable position or movement that you had. So another example of that is, so some people, they might struggle to, just through the foot and the ankle, which is of course key for your sprinting and your jumping. They may struggle to, because they have so much ankle dorsiflexion, they might actually just be tapping into that in everything that they do, when it's actually upping their contact times. So I find that people who have a lot of ankle mobility or mobility in general, they tend to have a higher ground contact time when they do like a depth jump or sprinting or jumping, bounding, striding in general. So and that actually might be optimal for them. However, if they are, overdoing it, they may be losing a little bit of the speed and the power. And then if you're looking at like speed parkour as an application of this, in speed parkour, every contact, every touch is accumulating time, and your goal is to have the least amount of time as possible. It does get really gray. Like, you can't be too fast. If you're too fast off the ground, you're not going to jump as far, you're not going to run as fast. But if you're too slow, same problem. So you do have to find the sweet spot. And for somebody who's super stiff like me, that sweet spot tends to be a little quicker. Whereas the hypermobile person tends to be a little longer. However, when it comes to speed parkour, you got to find that balance, and you got to push it as hard as you can.
Right. It's like finding that optimal ground contact time to then produce or apply the most amount of force to get you to where you want to go next. And I guess the thing that's unique about parkour and I guess speed competitions in particular is that it's not like a linear sprint. It's not on a track. It's not flat. It's up, it's down, it's big, it's small jumps. So how do you kind of account for that in training and to kind of differentiate from just the pure, like I said, linear speed sprinting on a track on flat ground? What does that look like in terms of, introducing obstacles and all those things?
Yeah, so that depends a lot on the course and the competition. So like the competitions that Valentin has been doing, the FIG, which that's based in Lausanne, Switzerland, I think. So they're doing these competitions that are very linear. So yes, they do kind of go like up and down and over some stuff, but they're more like a straight shot, or like a there and a back sort of thing. What I personally think is a better representation of parkour is more of the like changing direction and up and down and weaving in and out and under, and just like anything and everything is kind of fair game.
Right.
So I enjoy those courses more, and they're a little more complex. I think training those complex courses, actually, that's going to give you free gains on the linear stuff as well, but not vice versa. The people who just focus on the more linear ones, they're going to get good at that, but not so good at the more complex, like windy ones. So there's that to think about. And yeah, sorry, what was the original question there?
It was just the balancing out of how do you, it's not a linear sprint, but you're trying to still be as efficient as you can with your ground contact times and try to produce the most force possible. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a blog post on parkoured.org, one of my websites, which I really dived into I think it's called speed stats or speed parkour stats, something like that. You can Google it, but basically I took, so a competition that we did at Apex Denver a year or two ago, I was actually there, and I was on the gimbal and the camera filming every single run. Um, so that's another kind of hobby or interest of mine, is bringing video into this stuff. So how can we use video in creative ways to actually research and study and deliver content and teach people? So I was behind the camera filming every single run. And then I took every single run of the top, I think it was the top 8 or so. And I counted every single touch, and I counted every single frame of every single touch.
Right.
And totaled up the time of hand touches, or hand touch contact time, foot touch contact time, how many foot touches, how many hand touches, all these crazy, ridiculous, tedious things that were just kind of something that I was interested in seeing. And I wouldn't say that anything was like super surprising about what we found, but we did at least kind of prove some basic principles of speed parkour, which I think is always good to at least have some data behind what you're saying. So we found that the top athletes would use less touches in general. They usually had quicker ground contact times, or like a less total amount of ground contact time. And so when you approach this in 2 ways, like you can get faster on speed parkour in a couple ways. You can just get better and more skilled in general. You can also learn how to reduce your touches. So don't put your hand on something if you don't need to. Don't take an extra stutter step if you don't need to. And again, there are no dogmas, there's no rules, there are always exceptions. I can't be like, you need the fewest amount of touches as possible.
Right.
Because if you do too few touches, then you're not going to be able to clear this gap, or you're not going to be able to make this move. So you need to do the fewest amount of touches as possible to like do the thing in a quick, competent way. And oftentimes people just, when they're getting into parkour or speed parkour, they do too many touches, they do stutter steps, they need to lengthen out their stride, they need to touch things less, only touch when you need to. And that's, again, where I go back to like speed parkour especially is very lower body dominant. You should probably not be touching your hands on anything that you could just simply, run or stride or jump or step over. So a lot of the top athletes in speed parkour, they tend to, actually I've seen some of the legendary speed athletes, like Dylan Baker was a local guy here in Colorado who won a bunch of competitions. And at one point he had 2 broken scaphoids, both wrists. So he had basically no hands for a while. And he was still training parkour and crushing it just by being completely like leg dominant.
Right.
So it goes to show that maybe the arms, the upper body training is a bit overrated in parkour, at least if you're like a speed parkour athlete. You should probably just put more of your time into being able to sprint faster, jump farther, lift your weights, do your plyometrics, do your speed course runs, and then approach your speed parkour training in a mindset of, I need to try to reduce my touches as much as possible. And then I need to reduce the contact time as much as possible. And if I can kind of go check through some of those things, then I'm going to end up with a run that is hopefully near my, best potential run that I could have done. And in speed parkour, there's like a couple ways to look at it. There's like the run or the skills or the way that is the fastest that the world's best could do. So I'll look at a course and I'll be like, okay, if I was Dylan Baker, or if I was Valentin, or whoever is like really good at speed parkour, how would they do this? Okay, I can't quite do that. So I'm going to modify this and this and this, and that's going to be my best run. So my best run is maybe only 90% of their best run, but it's good to kind of think about both and then do your best.
Right. So kind of try to model what you do on the best of the world, but then also take into account that you're not necessarily, you don't all have all the same attributes that they might have, or the same physical qualities that allow them to maybe take, 3 strides when you need 4, and those kind of things.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, Valentin, he's got the range. We talk a lot about this. He has more range and reach than just about anyone. So he's one of those guys who can use the fewest amount of touches, or fewer touches than pretty much anyone. Where he struggles at is he just needs to get a little quicker. He needs to get a little quicker off the ground. So each touch that he has is maybe just a bit too long. But that's not a bad problem to have. He's got the hard part covered. Now I just got to speed it up a bit.
Exactly. So transitioning a little bit, talking about strength in parkour. So you wrote the book. What drove you to write the book Strength Training for Parkour, and what place does it have for you? Should beginners, partake in strength training as well? Can you kind of take the 101 approach to
Yeah.
strength for parkour?
Yeah. So like I was saying before, I came from this background of team sports and weightlifting, and I've always been interested in strength training just because I also never have considered myself very naturally gifted at any sport. And I felt like I've always been the guy that had to put in a little extra work in the weight room, or maybe just like be more strategic or
Mhm.
just think about things more. And that's kind of like my advantage. My advantage has never been like sheer athletic talent. So I think that really motivated me just to dive into that field quite a bit. And then, of course, so many people struggle with this. Like, there's only a handful of world's top athletes. Like, you can't have that many of them, otherwise they wouldn't be the top athletes. So most people do need some extra power or strength or mobility or whatever, and they maybe don't know how to go about it. Like I was saying before as well, like 10, 15 years ago in parkour, people weren't talking about physical training that much. And so I found that was like my niche. I was like one of the only guys like really, diving deep into it and pumping out content to try to help people learn and get better. So I think that naturally, I was just doing that for free on the internet, like originally through YouTube and then through Facebook or Instagram or whatever, like blog posts. And so I was it's like I was writing the book without knowing it. And then eventually I just kind of realized like, I should probably take this project a little bit further. And actually my co-author for the book, Ben Muselt, who is a physical therapist in Portland, Oregon. And way back 10 years ago or more, he took one of my seminars in Seattle.
Mhm.
So that was kind of when I met this guy. And then he ended up doing our coaching certification through Parkour EDU. And so we had this relationship, and he approached me at one point and was like, hey, I want to write this, because he had written a book about a couple of books actually. The one before was called Mad Skills Encyclopedia, I believe. So it was a lot about like body weight training. And so he had the same interest as me, and he approached me and said, I want to write this book about parkour strength training, and I'm going to do it either way, but you should really be like involved because you've been doing that. And so I was like, yeah, I should be involved with that. And so we wrote the book together. And um, yeah, it was almost just like accumulating and organizing all the stuff that we had already kind of made over the years.
Mhm.
And then, to be honest, at this point, so it's been, I think, 4 or 5 years now since we published the book. I already feel like the book is pretty outdated and my ideas have changed a lot. And some things that I said in the book, I maybe don't agree with now, or I maybe wouldn't place as much emphasis on, or there would be some new content that I would put into it if I were to revise it or redo it at this point. And actually, one thing I'm doing for the past few months here, especially with the pandemic. And so, not to get on a side tangent or anything here, but so I owned a couple gyms, and in March we had to shut everything down because of the quarantine. And we ended up having to completely shut down one of my locations in Louisville. So that's like the town over from Boulder, like 8 miles away from where I am now.
Mhm.
There's just no way we were going to be able to make this work with our landlord and the situation financially that it had been in. And so we had to shut down one of our locations permanently, tore it down, destroyed the place completely, up and out of it as of early June. And this is incredibly like annoying and difficult. And we thought we were going bankrupt, and it was a struggle. And I think one of the ways that we kind of coped with not only the mental health, stuff about that everyone's facing, with various challenges from quarantine, but those were some of mine. And the one way that I was kind of coping with it was I was going out with my girlfriend Taylor and shooting all kinds of videos to almost like update the book. So
Mhm.
that like all these movements, the new movements that I wish I would have put in there, now we've got video demos going up every day on YouTube for, I think I have a streak now of 60 days in a row that I've
Nice.
posted just a quick demo video up on YouTube.
Yeah.
And the goal here is that we're slowly building up this massive library of not only everything that was in the book, but everything that I wish was in the book,
Mhm.
and everything that I would change now. It's just we're slowly kind of revising and updating it through video, actually.
Right.
So I'm kind of leaning toward some of my next projects will be accumulating. Like once we have all the videos, I can accumulate those into, I haven't really told anyone this idea, and maybe I shouldn't, but I'm going to say it anyway because I think it's a good
World
idea.
premiere, world premiere.
I'm not worried about people taking this idea. I think they probably should take this idea and apply it in their own way. But I've never really seen an ebook that had animated GIFs built into it.
Hmm.
So if you got this, ebook up on your iPad or your laptop or whatever, and you're just like swiping through the pages, imagine that you could look at this book and just have looping GIFs. Like, here's how to do it right.
Yeah.
Swipe the page. Here's how to do it wrong. Swipe the page. Here's all the like common errors or the form, whatever. And then accompany that with the text, of course. And I looked into the technology, and as of just in the past year, so just recently, the .epub format is capable of embedding animated GIFs into the book. I guess I should specify GIF. It's a GIF,
Right,
not a GIF.
right.
For all the internet nerds out there.
Both work. I think both work.
Yeah. So yeah, just imagine a book that is actually more like a video book. I don't know what to call it. But that's probably one of the next projects, is accumulating. So we've got like 200 of these demos up over the past couple months. And I think I've got a list of like 200 or 300 more that I want to get posted up on the internet for free.
Yeah.
And then maybe we'll go back and combine it or compile it into some kind of video book format. And I just think that'd be, the problem with online courses is oftentimes you have to like sit through a long video just to get like a couple little nuggets of information, and then like go out and try it or whatever. And I'm just thinking like maybe there's a quicker way. Maybe we have it all laid out in book format and you just swipe through and see all the looping GIFs. I think that might be a more consumable way to like learn a lot in a very short amount of time. So
yeah, I think it's a fantastic idea. I think it's a fantastic idea. And I don't have it, top of my head, but the only thing I'd be worried about is the size of the document. Once you animate everything, how compressed can you get a GIF or a GIF to still be, watchable? Because it is a bunch of images, I guess, looping through. So, but, like you said, it doesn't need to be, full HD kind of thing. As long as people get the movement, get the main idea, that can, be enough to definitely take a step up from just a picture.
Yeah. And yeah, that's a good point. That's one of the things that I have yet to see, like how big would this actually become as far as the file size goes. But yeah, you could compress all the GIFs down to as little as possible. And even if they're like a little choppy or a little like low quality, I think people are okay with that actually nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it doesn't have to be perfect. And then of course in an ebook format, you can just link to the full demo. If they want to look more, they can just go on YouTube or whatever. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, still thinking it through, but I'll give everyone out there one other little tech update tidbit. Maybe they can work with this. So the innovation of the .epub format recently being able to handle these animated GIFs, that's cool, but it's still maybe not the easiest for people to create their own ebook. However, over the past year, again, it's crazy. Like the world we live in, like every year there's some new breakthrough where, now people like us can just make their own ebook, no problem, like on a laptop. So I'm on a MacBook right now, and the Pages app or the Pages program, it's kind of like the Microsoft Word of Apple. They have templated ebooks laid out for you, like good design, simple, looks nice, and you can just like fill in your own stuff and move stuff around, and it's super easy. And just click a couple buttons, export the .epub, and you could upload it to gumroad.com or like your own website or whatever and start selling. Like you could create an entire ebook with animated GIFs and just like put on your website, start selling it in one day if you wanted to.
I think that's a good tip. I'm going to have to go and check out those templates.
Yeah. They've got templates for like newsletters and actual books and essays or resumes or whatever. Like it's templates for everything now. So I'm always into the idea of like, find an example of what you like and then just start like tweaking it and like rewriting it, reorganizing it in your own way.
Yeah,
it's so easy to do that now.
Yeah, it's probably the best way of doing things. Going back to the strength training in parkour, if we talk about kind of the general strength training for a beginner, how does that compare to what strength training would look like for a higher level, maybe even world class parkour athletes? What does their strength training look like?
Yeah, so definitely some major differences between the beginner and the top athlete in parkour. Um, However, I try to approach it with a mindset of actually probably originally took this or got this insight from CrossFit. So I did my CrossFit certification, I think in like 2006 or seven or
Hmm.
something like pretty early on.
Early. That sounds early. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then when we opened our own space of Apex School of Movement in 2009, it was originally a CrossFit affiliate because
Hmm.
we thought we maybe needed that to be a viable business. At the time, it was the third parkour gym in the entire world, so it was very unproven.
Right.
I think there was Monkey Vault in Toronto, Primal Fitness in Washington, D.C., and then it was us. And
Right.
we had no idea what we were doing, but we figured it out along the way, sort of. But anyway, where I'm getting at is through the CrossFit cert, and of course, CrossFit has the good and the bad and the ugly. And over the years, it's become more sportified. Or we could go deep into that, but that's
Right.
besides the point. The point is that when I did my CrossFit cert for the first time, my mind was blown. I was just like in my early 20s, I think, and actually no, I think I might have been like 18 or 19, something like
Hmm.
that. So I was still new to a lot of these ideas, and they hammer home the idea of progressions and scalability. So you could have an entire class of 20 CrossFit people doing the same exact workout, but different progressions for each one of them. And so I really try to keep that mentality for parkour
Hmm.
training as well. Um, so a couple ways that you could think about that for parkour. I see two main movements that sort of really embody at least the body weight training of parkour. So you've got your climb up, which is where you're hanging onto a wall and you basically do a muscle up to get up and over the wall.
Hmm.
So it's like a muscle up applied to the real world, because in the real world, there are very few bars and almost zero rings. Occasionally you find some scaffolding or like a tree branch, but for the most part, you're going to encounter, especially in the urban environment, you're going to encounter gates, fences, walls
Hmm.
of all shapes and sizes. And the climb up is basically the muscle up applied to that. So
Hmm.
I think that's one pretty cool innovation that parkour has done, is just like this one technique, getting up and over a wall. People have taken this so far at this point where they can just be like, boom, like land the feet up on top all in
Hmm.
one fluid motion, extremely powerful. It takes upper body pulling strength for the first part. It takes upper body pushing strength for the second part. You've got to have at least, some basic competency in your squat and your landing when you land up on top of it. So it's a really great movement to cover all of your upper body stuff.
Hmm.
And of course, a lot of beginners, they can't actually do that. They can't go hang on the wall, and they try their hardest and they like get here and they maybe like get one elbow up and over, and then they get stuck and they have to like
Yeah.
kind of fall down. So what do they need to do? They need to work on obviously their pull-up strength. That's going to make it quite a bit easier. Also push-ups, and more specifically, I think the parkour is pushing down, so more like a dip
Hmm.
versus a push-up. So those kind of two things are like, they're the way basic end of the progression map of like a climb up. And eventually you get your level one climb up, which is like forearms and kind of wiggling your way up, not very fast or clean, but does the job.
You get
And
there. Yeah.
now you don't have to be that guy who gets saved by Spider-Man because you can't pull yourself up and over. So that's kind of like one huge milestone, is when people can finally get up and on top of the wall. And then in order to get much stronger and better at this movement, we want to get symmetrical. We want to go just hands, no forearms, and then it becomes quicker. So we kind of have like a level 1, 2, 3 sort of system
Hmm.
as people work through those milestones. So everyone in a class could be training climb ups, but in their own sort of scalable or progressive way.
Hmm.
And the very far end of that is people might just start out with hanging on a bar
Yeah.
and doing a support hold. And they might not be able to do a push-up or a pull-up at this point, but they're at least going to start developing the grip strength, the upper body hanging, pulling, and pushing strength as well.
Have,
And then on the other far end of the spectrum, you've got like the top athlete doing climb ups. They're going to be doing it for speed, for power, maybe landing so you can jump into it, land with bent arms, resist, don't absorb. So actually resist and just go from bent arm.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can try to do it in less steps or less touches. That's kind of like the level 2 or 1, 2, 3 system. They sort of are progressively becoming more efficient and less touches, but the problem is it also requires more strength and power. So people can work through that eventually over a long time, getting better at the climb up. That's one major movement. The other one, I see like a lot of parkour skills really just embodied into one single movement, is the depth jump.
Mm-hmm.
So at least from like a physical training standpoint, not necessarily skill training, because parkour is very complex with like you're jumping off walls onto rails, or like changing direction, high to low to high, across a building. Like there's all these other factors. But if we were to boil it down, I think the depth jump is a really great example of ways that people can train, no matter if you're a beginner or a top athlete.
Mm-hmm.
So a beginner can be training like a depth jump, for people who don't know, that's where you stand up on, maybe like, if you're starting out, you could just, if you're starting out, you would just do this stuff on flat ground. So just consecutive jumps or various jumping landing variations on flat ground. Once you've got a decent squat and you understand how to land safely, then we can start to build it up and actually train like some of these high impact plyometrics. So for example, like you're probably familiar with Yuri Verkhoshansky and the shock method and all this amazing plyometric innovation and knowledge that came out of the old Soviet Union, like in the 50s and 60s, I think. So depth jump is kind of like one of his main go-to things that I've really adopted into our training as well. So you can stand up on, at first you just stand on like a tiny little wall. It could be like this high. It could be one single weight plate.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just gonna like step off it, land on 2 feet and jump as far as you can, or step off it, land on 2 feet and jump as high as you can. Or you can jump over something, or you can do single leg variations or whatever. There's tons of variations, but really at its core, I see like depth jump for height and depth jump for distance.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're able to work on your horizontal power and your vertical power, because they are a little different. But again, like going back to the scalability and the progressions, that this mentality I learned early on through CrossFit and other things, is we can have everyone in the same class training depth jumps for distance. Some people are going to be stepping off a weight plate this tall, and the top athlete might be pushing it up to like knee high, waist high, or beyond. And it's the same movement. It's just when you make it taller, you're essentially progressively overloading via gravity or height. Kind of like when we weightlift. In order to get better at weightlifting, you got to slowly add a little bit more weight over time.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to get better at some of these plyometric stuff, you can slowly build up the height over time, and it becomes a little bit more high impact. Your body slowly becomes more adapted to handling that impact. And then when you take away that big drop and you just jump on flat ground, you feel like it's way easier, because you don't have to overcome so much force.
What are some of the common mistakes that you see made today in strength training for parkour?
That probably depends a lot on the person, or the place, the location in the world that you're in, or the community that you're in. Some communities around the world, they have people like me who just like keep hammering this home, like you got to lift, you got to do plyos, you got to train, like otherwise you're going to get hurt, or you're not going to be able to do that challenge that you want to do, or you're not going to be able to keep up with that local athlete that you look up to or like strive to want to be like. So yeah, I think at this point, like it's pretty well accepted in the parkour world that you should do physical training, and you probably should lift, and you probably should do, intelligent plyos and body weight training and mobility and like all this stuff. But I think a lot of people still don't know how to like tie it all together into their program, or actually like have a program. A lot of people still they know they need to do these things, and they do it here and there, maybe like once a week, or honestly, most people probably do like once every couple weeks, or whenever they get the chance. And so they're not doing it enough, or they're not doing it at all. And I don't know, one thing I think about from my perspective, it's funny, like if I write a program for somebody, or if I tell them like, you need to lift, or like do this or that, it's almost like they just need to do something. They don't even need my expertise. They just need to do something, or they just need to do it a little bit more often.
Yeah.
So even like, it's not rocket science to do like 3x5 of deadlift followed by some jumps, or like do a 3x5 of pull-ups and dips. And like, it doesn't have to be rocket science. Like that, just that right there, like deadlift or squat, do some jumps, do your pull-ups and push-ups, or if you're smart, just combine it in your muscle up or climb up training. And yeah, like it doesn't have to be that complicated. So people just need to do it more. They need to just understand that it can be simple and it can be easy. You just got to be consistent.
So maybe transitioning into that, programming part, which is what you do. You program for parkour athletes, you write strength and conditioning programs, the parkour progressions as well. So what are your main kind of high level, what are your main considerations when you put together a program for someone? What are the first things that you're going to think about and how you're going to structure it on paper?
Yeah, so I'm still kind of figuring out some of that because I have been doing remote training for, on and off here and there for 2 or 3 years now. And so I've learned a lot. In some ways, remote training is really great because it's like you can help somebody on the other side of the world who doesn't have access to a gym or a coach, and maybe, they want to learn from you. And because of Zoom and because of, various apps or technology, like we can make it happen now. And it still can be successful.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm still kind of figuring it out, and it depends on the person so much, and also the people who come to me because they want my help with programming. Sometimes it's because of the physical aspect, but sometimes it's also because of the skill training, or sometimes it's a mixture of both. And so I'm constantly juggling, like, okay, so this person is a beginner, they can't do a pull-up, they can't do a push-up, they've never even done parkour, they don't know how to roll or land or vault or anything. Okay, what does that look like? And so luckily, 4 or 5 years ago, we created an online course called Parkour 101, and the other half is called Parkour 102. Together, we call it the Parkour 100 series. So it's an online course that takes you through all the basic skills of parkour in like pre-recorded lecture and follow along sort of format. So we luckily already made that before the pandemic hit. So that was good. I think lots of people are now realizing that they should probably at least have something online that they can refer their students to. So we had that already built. And when I'm talking about this total beginner, not very strong, maybe not very mobile, they just need to start with some basic skills and some basic, strength training. So again, it's like, it doesn't have to be complicated. Just do some squats, do some deadlift, maybe chin up, dip, push up, maybe a little bit of like handstand stuff, or what else? Some basic plyometrics, basic jumping, running, sprinting. Maybe not super intense at first for that beginner, but yeah, they just need like this general little bit of everything. And then if you look at like the top athletes, if somebody's really getting into parkour and they're very serious about it, they're already quite skilled, maybe quite strong and powerful. I oftentimes find that they still have like glaring weaknesses, and you just got to find them, or you got to expose them and then make them realize and see that they need to work on it. So like some of the stories I was given earlier on, like when I never realized how tight my ankles were until eventually it was like too late and I got surgery, and then is like a huge setback that I am still trying to catch back up with today. Yeah, for top athletes, we're definitely, the programs are going to change, but again, like I was saying, they can still be doing their climb up training, like beginners and advanced. We're doing climb ups, we're doing depth jumps, basic plyos, and basic lifting. The top athletes are probably going to they may expand more into the lifting stuff. So like I usually start people just with squat and deadlift, or squat or deadlift, one or the other. And eventually some of the top athletes start getting into like their power cleans, hang cleans, squat cleans, front squats, various variations of squats and deadlifts, and maybe weighted dip, weighted chin up, starting to add some weight to some other things. Maybe like ideally you could get one of those sleek, like really mobile, like weight vests or ways to just add like even just a little bit of weight, adding it on to like when you're doing a climb up or some of that stuff can be really good. And then also I think just adding more intention to, usually the top athletes are training for some very specific reason, such as like doing well in a speed parkour competition. So we would be like we even experiment with some stuff like you do some heavy squats or deadlifts or some heavy chin-ups or whatever, and then immediately right after go into like an expression of power. So just do a short, simple line. Like it can maybe just be like a stride, plyo, or something simple, not trying to get too complicated or skill or technical, but just something where you can like really power through it and like, hook yourself at the wall and power up. And so they're doing it with this intention of speed, like do whatever, like fill in the blank, this movement for speed. Not, for a lot of beginners, it's like for quality, like we're just going to do it, make sure you got good form, and eventually we can add some power and speed and, try to do it as fast as possible or whatever.
No, that makes sense. I want to talk about something that I saw on your website. So in 2016, correct me if I'm wrong, but you partnered with the Division of Kinesiology and Health of the University of Wyoming to deconstruct various parkour landing techniques for actually a research paper that was published earlier this year. So can you talk a little bit about maybe what's so particular about different parkour landing techniques, and then what were the main takeaways of that study?
Yeah, so we've been lucky enough to actually, since I was in college, I went to University of Colorado at Boulder here in Boulder. And when I was a junior at college, I did an independent study with the biomechanics lab. So we're actually all the way back to, let's see here, like 2007 or 8 or something. This was kind of the beginning of that like scientific or like research approach. So yeah, when I was a junior, I designed a parkour landing study with the head of the biomechanics lab here at CU Boulder. And that guy's name is Dr. Cram, Roger Cram. And actually you can go online and find a couple of these other studies that we've done with. The one you mentioned is University of Wyoming, but we've also worked with University of Colorado at Boulder. So yeah, I think we've done, when I did that independent study, that was the first one. And then actually it's probably at least 6 or 7 years later. So I had graduated college, opened my own gym. I didn't hear too much from this professor until one day he just hit me up and he said something like, I have a couple students who want to do parkour in their study or their like thesis or whatever it was. So he sent a few of his higher level students our way to our gym, and he got to come to our gym and check us out. Like he didn't really seen that I was able to like take this and progress this into like my own business and all that.
Right.
So that was cool to have him come to the gym. And we did another study, which was a wall run study. So where you like run and kick up off the wall to reach up as high as you can.
Yeah.
And he installed force plates onto our wall, and we measured the forces of like kicking up off the wall to see like what technique is going to get you the highest and all that kind of stuff. So that was the second study. And then the third study is the one that you mentioned with University of Wyoming, again, delving into various different landing styles. And I think, again, like the speed stat paper or blog that I was telling you about, it wasn't like super surprising. Yeah. It's like a lot of common sense, like, yeah, you shouldn't be sticky when you touch everything. You need to try to not waste touches. Like it seems pretty obvious, but it's good to have data to back it up. And I think probably the biggest takeaways of this University of Wyoming study on parkour landings or landings in general is that people can actually land safely from way higher than we thought. So it's not like a mind-blowing thing. Of course, you can like go through all their data and probably come up with some other interesting things. They did it in an interesting way. So the 2 prior studies we had done were with force plates. So you're actually like hitting the force plate and measuring that and generating data through that. Yeah. The way that they did it was, I'm not as familiar with this technology or how it works, but they set up lights, like massive lights, and these weird like spindly structures with like balls on the end, like kind of motion capture style.
Okay.
And then they had high-speed cameras, I think multiple cameras set up. And then just with the visualization or like spatial mapping of where you're at.
And a modeling of the jump. Yeah.
I don't know all the correct terminology of it here, but yeah, they use these really cool structures and high-speed cameras and lights. And then without any force plates, they're still able to calculate like the speed of the landing and deceleration and still come up with good data. but yeah, the main takeaways there were that there are different styles of landing that work under different circumstances,
Mhm.
and people could actually take way higher drops than they maybe thought about. So I think one thing he mentioned is when universities go through this approval process for a new study that they want to do, oftentimes the school or the higher ups or whoever is like approving this, they're going to implement certain or require certain safety standards. Like, you can only use these sort of people, or they have to be this age, or they have to sign the waiver, they have
Yeah.
to do this or that. Like, everything's got to be super kosher. Like, we got to,
There's the ethical side of the
right,
research that has to be done in a way that is not going to harm someone, knowingly,
exactly.
because otherwise you can't actually run the thing.
Yeah, and so I think one of the interesting breakthroughs with the University of Wyoming study is that they realized and somehow managed to get approval for us to jump off of things that were, I think we pushed it up to like 8 or 9 feet up,
Hmm.
so about 3 meters.
Yeah.
And we were like, we could go higher, like we could go much higher and like roll out of it too. And
Yeah.
they're like, like we can't do that yet. But I think when they published this study, it was like a year or two later, so we didn't hear much from them for a bit. And then, like you said, they recently published it, I think earlier this year or last year or something. And then they are in contact with us. Actually, everything got kind of blown up because of the pandemic, but before that, we were talking with them about doing a follow-up study to that, where we
Mhm.
could actually go higher up and continue to push this, because they were able to prove that yes, people can do this and they didn't get hurt and it was all good. Like, let's go higher. And they can actually present that to people and make a solid argument that it is safe and it is ethical. And so they want to do some follow-up studies, and they were explaining how one of their main intentions or like goals or applications of this research would be to develop some kind of program or series of exercises or movements, or like a very basic simple training that could be delivered to college level athletes, like volleyball players or
Mhm.
basketball players or anyone who's jumping and landing. How can we design a very basic program or class or whatever, where they learn how to squat and land and roll and fall? And if, like, these are all very connected things. Like,
Mhm.
when you jump off of something, you kind of squat and you land and you roll or fall of some sort, depending on the context. But their goal with that is that, and I see it all the time too, like athletics, sports is rampant with like horrible mechanics and,
Mhm.
valgus foot and knee collapse during running and jumping and landing. And that's when ACLs tear and, Achilles ruptures. And there is actually, I don't know about Europe, but I've seen some data where like ACL tears in high school and college athletes is going way up. And it's because, bad footwear or sedentary lifestyle, sitting too much, lack of education, um, more year-round season training, or just so many factors that are basically causing people to get hurt a lot
Mhm.
more than they probably should. And if University of Wyoming, the main professor there is, again, he wants to figure out, is there a way where we can learn from parkour and these studies how to design and implement a very basic training that could, theoretically, you give me like a couple days with some college volleyball players, and I could probably, I don't know how much I could reduce their risk of injury, or how much exactly, I don't know how to quantify this, but I'm
Mhm.
sure that we could make them better, or prevent a few injuries, keep them on the court for longer, keep them in the game for longer. So I think that's ultimately where they want to go with that.
So besides that kind of, which I think is a great initiative, and like you said, it's not just for parkour; it actually transfers over to many other sports that involve those basic movements. What other studies would you be interested in seeing done in the realm of parkour itself, even just for your own personal interest or curiosity?
Hmm. It's a good question. I don't know if I have anything off the top of my head, but probably in general, things related to speed parkour,
Hmm.
because I think, yeah, learning from the falling, landing, rolling kind of impact related aspect or angle, that's a great way to help athletes or people in all other sports.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's probably one of the biggest ways that parkour could help other athletes, is just in general better squatting, landing, rolling, falling. But I think parkour is also incredibly, open-ended, well-rounded. There's so many ways you could take it. The climb up is another thing that I'm really into. So the muscle up on the wall, I'm not sure what kind of studies I would try to design around that or what questions I would have, but maybe something there just to get some actual data, maybe to back up
Right.
whatever we're talking about. And then the other area I'd be interested to see a lot more research and studies, whether it's from me or from other people, would be in speed parkour. So I think about like, how can we find this algorithm or this like formula to like, or mental checklist, kind of like what I was getting at, like reduce your touches as much as you can, then make the ground contact times as short as you can. Maybe like a more thoughtful formula or algorithm there that could give people the principles of just like, okay, you got to do this, this, and then that's going to help you figure out the fastest way to do this course and the fastest way to get better and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think in speed parkour, that's the more objective, measurable kind of scientific area of study in parkour. So I would probably try to think of more ways we could explore that. And then on the other hand, again, not to like knock like the stylistic or aesthetic, creativity, acrobatic sort of elements of parkour, but I'm just not sure how or what you would design a study around for that. So yeah, I'm a science nerd. I like numbers and measurements, and speed parkour is a very natural way to explore that.
It's probably the closest you'll get to a stopwatch sport, right? In the realm of parkour. And I guess the courses are still, they still vary from competition to competition, but you could almost see it one, maybe dimension or where things would go towards one specific course with those specific features, and everybody kind of trains on that one and sees, who goes fastest on that one course.
You mean like a standardized course?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an interesting conversation, I think. In some ways that completely goes against the idea of parkour, which is to kind of be ready for anything and be super adaptable and be ambidextrous and capable of just any challenge that you may face. However, I do think there are also some interesting things that could come out of like a standardized course so like in speed climbing, I believe they have this exact same wall and the exact same holds and patterns that people all over the world can kind of participate in, because I know that they actually have one here in Boulder. I know they have them in various places all over the world, and it was supposed to be an Olympic sport this year before it got canceled. But yeah, I think that is interesting. I don't know if I like it though. I think it's kind of silly that some people, I'm probably going to offend right now, but I think it's kind of silly that people would just want to train the same exact course for years and years just to get like teeny tiny little bit better.
Yeah.
Not my thing, but if they want to do that, okay, whatever.
Yeah, it might be interesting. Sorry to cut you off from just a research perspective. Let's put everyone on that one course for like a year, and let's see how far we can actually push it. Let's see if there's some details that we can develop and techniques and all those, like you said, have more, because as soon as you change things, it becomes a lot more complicated to measure anything consistently over time. But if you had one course, again, not forever, because like you said, it's not that interesting even for the athletes after a while. But for research purposes, maybe you have that one set course with those, maybe say there's 10 key movements in a speed run that you might see that are all incorporated in a certain sequence, and see what's the effect of changing the sequence of those ones and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree there. That's like the one caveat I was going to get at is I totally agree. I'd be interested to see, like, that'd be cool if we had 100 top athletes all over the world training on this one course, like right now, and we could constantly see their progress, and maybe some guy unlocks some jump or something that nobody else ever thought of or thought was possible. And then, it's just like any sport. Once somebody does it, once somebody runs that 4-minute or 3-minute or whatever mile, then a bunch of other people realize that they can do it too. And there's something to be said about that first person that unlocks the new jump or the challenge or the milestone, and then this like wave of other people also follow in their footsteps. And I think that's really cool. And yeah, maybe that could be an interesting thing. And actually that reminds me, so there's kind of two examples of this more like standardized course that I was just thinking about. One of them is, there's a test that I came up with probably 10, 12 years ago, and it's just 5 climb ups for time.
Yeah.
So you hang on that wall and you get all the way to feet up on top and then back down 5 in a row as fast as you can. And I never thought it was going to be this widespread, but there's still people all over the world who do that test and will like tag me in it. And they'll, at this point, I think the top time is actually a local guy, Seth Wang here, who could do 5 of them in like 8.5 seconds or something like that.
Yeah.
And a few years back when I was the one like really pushing this and I had the top time, it was like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And then I can't even imagine like back down to 8.5. And then there's like few other people around the world who are pushing 8.5, and I think 7 something might be possible.
Wow.
And the reason I think this is such a popular like little benchmark to do is it takes 10 seconds, right? Like anyone can do it in 10 seconds, and all you need is a wall.
Yeah.
So everybody can find a wall. Not everyone can find the exact course, like idea that we were just talking about, but at least we can all find a rail or a wall or a whatever. And in that sense, we can at least do like very specific or targeted challenges, like 5 climb ups for time. And because it had that score, or I think that's another reason it got so popular and people all over the world use it to develop their climb up, is because they can instantly just, like, you can't lie. You either have fast climb ups or not. And that test is going to reveal it. If I have a 10-second time on 5 climb ups for time and somebody watches that and they're like, yeah, that looks pretty easy. It's like, okay, go try it. Get a stopwatch and test yourself. And then they're at like 20 or 30 seconds and they're like, that guy's twice as fast as me. Okay, why is he so much faster? What do I need to do to get faster? And then when you get faster at that simple test, yeah, maybe it's not the most specific thing to parkour, but it does undebatably like improve your climb ups, and then you can apply that in your speed parkour runs and probably do faster climb ups in general. So that was one way that we do have at least that standardized aspect or test. And then the other interesting thing that is also very timely right now is, have you heard of World Chase Tag? Yeah, so World Chase Tag is doing their US Championships for the first time on October 10th to 14. And Apex will be sending a team to Atlanta, Georgia I think they have 16 teams from around the US who are going to compete, 6 people per team. And then it's kind of like this, for those people who don't know, it's like a one-on-one on a standardized course. So they have a standardized course that they use for all the World Chase Tag competitions. And it's kind of this interesting course of all these different platforms and bars. And it's like a giant square, and people run around the outsides. They could cut through the inside or go low or high, or and you're like juking and faking and cutting and dodging. And it actually adds kind of this interesting element that you don't find in parkour, which is an opponent. So most other sports like rugby or football or MMA, one of my favorite things to watch and study besides parkour at this point is MMA. And you're constant, like you have a strategy. You want to do this, like maybe you stand up and strike, or you want to bring it to the ground and grapple. But you don't necessarily get to do everything you want to do because you got to deal with this unpredictable opponent. So you're constantly in this dance and like reacting and doing these things. And that's what World Chase Tag adds to parkour. So in a way, it's kind of like parkour taken to this sort of variation or offshoot where you have an opponent and you actually have to fake someone out and like escape them. Or if you're the chaser, you got to chase them down and tag them. So it's almost like this application of parkour, sort of a real life challenge. Like you could use your imagination and be like, oh, well, what if someday I'm getting chased by somebody who wants to, like they got a knife and they're trying to take my wallet in a back alleyway. Could I just like run away and like find a fire escape ladder and pull myself up and just like point and laugh at them down at the ground? Could I use my skills to do that? And I think World Chase Tag is an interesting way to sort of, it's almost like sparring. It's like actually chasing and escaping and seeing if some of this stuff works.
Yeah, it brings, like you said, that reactive agility element to a sport that's otherwise very much based on yourself and then what you do with your own body with the obstacles that are in front of you. But now, like you said, you bring someone else in the picture, and you have to react and you have to find the course depending on where that person is, what that person is doing, and all those things, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm sure from a spectator standpoint, it's very exciting too.
Yeah, I saw their media deck recently because they are getting interest from, TV channels who want to broadcast this or whatever. But yeah, they've had millions of views like that. I'm sure you've seen some of it. It went viral. There's just like people going insanely fast and like ducking under bars, like narrowly avoiding like slamming their face into stuff. And it gets pretty intense and heated. And yeah, I've never actually done it, but we're just now starting to think about, okay, we got to get this team together and we got to figure out some maybe new ways to train and like try to at least get some basic understanding of strategy or whatever. So yeah, just now starting to think about that.
I guess a whole new world of interest for you to dive into, the whole kind of agility, multi-directional reaction
Yeah, yeah,
type of aspect of the physical preparation too, right?
yeah. And actually, I was looking through your, was it YouTube or I don't know what it was. It was your videos somewhere on YouTube, I think. But you have some of the like partner drills and I think
Right.
more applied to like rugby. But I look at that stuff and I think about, oh, like how could you add a rail in between them or like a wall or like create some additional layer of challenge or something. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I like to look at, your stuff or whoever's stuff, whether they're in rugby or gymnastics or whatever. And I think that's really the best way to progress in anything you do is to not only look from within your own niche or industry or area, but also look outward into other, I forget the exact quote, but I think it was Isaac Newton, something about standing on the shoulders of giants.
Mm.
And that's really what I've done in my own research and knowledge is, learning from Berkoshansky and Kelly Starrett, Ido Portal, Christopher Summer, Dr. Spina, like the list goes on. And you gotta learn from everything and everyone, not just your own experiences. And um, yeah, that's my approach to training and learning and coaching.
I kept the easiest question for you for the end here. Where do you see parkour going in the next 10 years as a sport?
I don't think that's an easy question. Uh, that could go in so many ways. And like I was saying a few times, parkour does have this sort of identity crisis. It's like, what are we? Are we an art? Are we a sport? Are we a martial art or a philosophy or a lifestyle? And depending on the person, you're going to get different answers. And I don't think any of them are wrong, but unfortunately, it makes it very hard for us to like unify and like gain momentum in a certain direction. So I guess I don't know where it's going to go, but what I hope or what I want to see, I hope that we see parkour just continue to grow and get more respect and understanding from outsiders because unfortunately I still go outside and I train and I hear the hardcore parkour joke from the office and just like memes and like people like do a backflip and they like don't get it. They don't understand that they're like some football player making fun of parkour, but actually they could learn a lot from parkour.
Mm.
So I think one of my biggest hopes is that people in other sports and other areas of life realize that they don't have to be like a top parkour athlete or jump roof gaps or do double backflips to benefit from parkour. They can just even like being able to pull yourself up and over a wall. Like that's a basic human skill that I think everyone should have. And if you want to refine that and make it faster and over time, get into parkour more, that's cool, but it's not necessary. I just think at the bare minimum, everyone should know how to squat and land and roll, like get down safely. They
Hmm.
should also know how to get up something quickly.
Hmm.
Like if you get locked out of your apartment and you got to climb up the balcony and like stem up this weird thing and squeeze through this and like get into your window. Like I do that. I've done that before because I was locked out
Hmm.
and most people couldn't do that. They couldn't have taken the climb or the route that I did. So I just hope people realize there's a lot of really interesting applications of this that they can apply to their everyday life, their fitness, their health, their sport. You don't even need to do parkour to benefit from parkour. it can benefit soccer players and tennis players and volleyball and all these other things too. I think maybe parkour's potential is almost bigger just from a cross training sort of aspect. And hopefully, when you're training your rugby players or whatever, maybe someday you'll find a wall and you can just give them this challenge, like, hey guys, can you get up this wall? Okay, half of you got up the wall and half of you failed. Okay, the half of you that got up this wall, now we're going to try to get it faster, and you just like do this drill and like learn this technique, and you guys like check your egos, like you got to get stronger, you got to get faster. But yeah, I hope to see that. I also hope to see the sport element, especially speed. I think speed parkour is very interesting to me. I think there's a lot to be learned and applied to other sports just through that continued exploration of what's the fastest way from A to B over all these weird obstacles. And I think we learn a lot from that. And yeah, so I'm taking more of a like training and performance kind of angle, which is probably why I'm on this podcast. But yeah, of course, other people are taking more of the artistic approach or the creativity, the aesthetics. I think it's all great. I think we need all these different brains and like personalities to find their own little niche and keep progressing the idea of parkour in their own way. So.
And it's been great chatting with you today about all things parkour. Where can people find out more about you and what you do if they don't follow you yet?
Yeah, so I'm putting out, like I said, 60 days in a row of new demo clips and training ideas on YouTube that you can just type in Ryan Ford on YouTube, or Demon Drills is technically the old school name of that channel. Also on Instagram, I'm fairly active, putting out some of the similar content. And our website's apexmovement.com, parkouredu.org. We have online courses. We do remote training and programming. We also have a couple physical locations of Apex School of Movement here in Denver, Colorado, as well as San Diego, California. So yeah, there's a bunch of ways to connect there in real life or online, just a message or an email away. So
cool, man. I'll make sure to link up all of those in the podcast description for the viewers and listeners. You guys, make sure you go and check out all the work that Ryan and his team are doing around parkour and parkour education. Thanks so much for coming on the show today, man. It's been a pleasure.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
Talk to you soon.